Hello, and welcome to another 8-minute demo. Today we're going to be walking through Policy to Runbook migration tips. My name is Charles Joy, Senior Program Manager for Microsoft.
Session objectives and takeaways. I'm going to illustrate what's new in System Center 2012 Orchestrator. Well, we're going to talk through it. Some of you already know. Discuss planning, design, testing, deployment, and execution, and show the steps involved in Policy to Runbook migration. I guess that's the important part and probably why you're here. For the most part, you'll find that it's not a difficult process. Well, it's not difficult at all. It may involve steps that are somewhat tedious, but it depends on what you're going from and what you're going to. So, we also want to recognize Policy to Runbook migration steps and overall feel prepared for upcoming Runbook migration. New in Orchestrator, the install experience. As you've used Opalis, you've probably installed it. And you know that from your experience on that, it could be painful. Well, this install experience for Orchestrator is very easy. Naming changed. The look of the Runbook designer changed. We have an IIS-based Silverlight orchestration console. We have a web service. It's RESTful, leverages OData. The Orchestrator Integration Toolkit replaces Kick. It's skin different. Well, it's not really that much different, other than it does what it needs to do to be compliant with Orchestrator. And I guess it looks a little different. It's obviously named different. There's an Operations Manager management pack. We added globalization, so it could run on non-EN-US OS. There have been a number of security improvements, i.e., encryption, and a whole bunch of bug fixes and product enhancements across many features, and more. So the Runbook tester can now test the invoke Runbook activity. There's some caveats there I'll go through in the demo. Variables now have an encrypted option. I'll also show you that all this stuff there's only one more thing. Invoke Runbook now offers a security credentials tab. And there's password protected exports. And passwords, if you export them with the password protection, you could import them and it won't blank out the password. And of course, there's more usability performance improvements for Orchestration Console. It's easier to use now. If you used it in beta, the Orchestration Console, the Silverlight, it might have been hard to navigate. Now it's much easier as far as usability is concerned. And of course, many more bug fixes, performance improvements, usability tweaks throughout. So, Runbook engine changes. Legacy mode is no longer available. Now there is only pipeline mode, which means you don't have the option there. This option has been removed. It means you can no longer create cycles or circular graphs. No more multiple starting points, so you can't have two starting points. And no more legacy objects, and I go through that in the next couple slides. And as a side note, the Opalis ROI setting has also been removed. Still in the database, but it's no longer something you could interact with in the GUI. So, what's in a name? One of the primary changes has to do with how we talk about Orchestrator. The following illustrates old to new naming. So, instead of policy, we have Runbook. Instead of object, we have activity. Instead of foundation objects, we have standard activities. Instead of OIS client, Runbook Designer. Action Server has turned into Runbook Server. Action Service has turned into Runbook Service. Policy Testing Console has turned into Runbook Tester. And Operator Console has turned into Orchestration Console. I have been saying the old names for a very long time, so I try my best not to say policy or object, but I say policy and object, so you will catch me doing that. But in the demonstration, I will talk about objects as they turn into activities. So hopefully that won't confuse you too much. So there's a number of standard activity changes. The first, all have received an icon facelift. So they all went through a little icon refresh. Some have undergone name changes as well. For example, in workflow control, you see custom start, publish policy data, junction, and trigger policy have changed to initialize data, return data, junction, and invoke Runbook. Some are no longer available, I know that some of this will make you sad, but disconnect dial-up and get dial-up status. They no longer exist, so sorry about that. Monitor event log capacity, monitor performance, purge event log, send page, send pop-up, await are no longer available. Some of them have replacements, some of them don't, like direct replacements, but you can figure out a way to manage. And if you're wondering what the send pop-up replacement is, it's obviously Twitter, so send tweet. For demo purposes, it's just as good as a pop-up anyway, I would say. And some standard activity changes have alternatives in this list, but some of them have, all of these have direct correlation. So there used to be something called manage text file, which had a drop-down for you to choose different things on how you interact with that object. Now, that has turned into a category called text file management, which includes append line, delete line, find text, and all those. So you'll see in the demonstration that if I import a policy that has managed text file, it'll be an unknown object, and I'll show you obviously how to get around all that. So what does all of this mean? You must rework policies that are configured for legacy mode. None of you raised your hand when I asked the question, so hopefully you won't have to do that. Policies that contain legacy objects. That's a bit different. When you go to import them, if they're question marks, then you'll know you have. But not a big deal. We have a process for that. The good news is the migration path is easy. You can import most, we'll talk about that on the next slide, OIS policies into Orchestrator. Nearly everything you have learned for OIS applies for Orchestrator. Let me reiterate that. Nearly everything you've learned for OIS applies to Orchestrator. And this is important because the best practices, how you build runbooks, how they interact with other systems, all of that stuff is knowledge. If you learn that in Opalis, then it'll apply for Orchestrator. So let's go on to talk about the most. So here's some migration path considerations. What's not supported? Opalis robot policies, all versions. Opalis Integration Server policies, all versions 5.2 and earlier. That's not supported. That's old stuff. No in-place upgrades are supported. It's a side-by-side. What's supported? Export and import of policies that fall under the following categories. Opalis Integration Server versions, all of those. Opalis Integration Server 6.3 policies. That's the Microsoft refresh of Opalis Integration Server. Orchestrator beta runbooks and all Orchestrator RC runbooks. Now, you're going to have runbooks that you created in beta that leverage some integration packs that need to be refreshed or updated to work with the RC. You may run into some that come across as unknown objects when you import those integration packs. That means that either it was updated and not upgraded from a version standpoint, or it doesn't yet exist for the RC, RTM, and forward. So RC, RTM, GA, forward, it's one kind of integration pack activity. In beta, it was a different type. So let's not forget the integration packs. OIS 6.3 third-party and System Center integration packs have to conform to a new encryption model, will not work in Orchestrator, require updating, and updated versions are new software for Orchestrator and will not work in previous versions. I've updated all the Codeplex stuff that I've created. I had a little trouble with the update process, that's why I know about it. And I have put up now copies that will work and upgrade from previous versions as opposed to something brand new. If you hit something like an unknown object for PowerShell IP or the standard logging IP, it's because you leveraged one of the versions that was created brand new and not upgraded. But now both are available. Orchestrator integration pack activities replace OIS 6.3 integration pack objects. And this goes for kick-made integration packs as well, which are now OIT-made integration packs. So what happened to Kick? Well, it's been replaced by the Orchestrator Integration Toolkit, or OIT. All OIS 6.3 kick-made integration packs and objects will need to be updated. So if you created any for yourself, you're going to have to essentially rework naming. Depends if you use .NET as opposed to just the command line. You'll need to retweak naming and then re-release it as Orchestrator. The update process is simple. It involves replacing the reference DLLs from kick to OIT. Find and replace the code, updating naming and references because they changed from object to activity and stuff like that. Recompile the DLL, and then recompile the integration pack in the new Orchestrator IP wizard. On to the migration, getting close. I'm going to go through the steps involved in the migration. There'll be giant metro-style boxes here. So, step 1, install Orchestrator on a new server. Step 2, export OIS 6.3 policies. Step 3, import the OIS 6.3 policies into Orchestrator. Step 4, rework the runbooks as necessary, replacing legacy objects, non-updated IP objects, and unknown objects. Now, you do have the option to do a lot of the work before you export them. That's completely up to you. They are side by side, so you could go back and forth as needed. And if you have two RDP windows open at one time, you could copy and paste stuff that may be pertinent for activity or object configuration. And then step 5, test the runbooks in the new environment. We're going to go through all of these steps in the demonstration, and I believe that happens fairly soon. We're done.
Thank you. You guys don't have to clap every time I move around. Anyway, I want to set this demo up. So, basically we're going to take stuff over here and move it over here. Over here to here. So we're going to be taking policies and turning them into runbooks. I hope that's crystal clear. That's all I'm going to do. So, I hope you enjoy, and let's check it out.
And I have to log in. All right. We have 2 environments. This one is Opalis Integration Server. You can see the orange up here, orange little plus sign. My other environment is, well, we all know about that refresh issue, so no sense in hiding it. You can see this is Orchestrator. It's blue. I have nothing imported in the Orchestrator. I'm wearing short sleeves and there's nothing up them, so there's there. I do have some stuff installed in this environment. One of the examples I use for this is that I import a runbook or a policy into a runbook that leverages the vSphere IP, and the vSphere IP is not installed, so we get to see what happens and what the process is. That's part of the demonstration. But the other one I do is leveraging the execute PowerShell script where it has been updated and upgraded from OIS so it comes across cleanly. So those are just 2 things that are further down in the demonstration. But first, we need to start over on the Opalis side. And we'll notice I have a whole bunch of our policies in here. This is really going to trip me up going back and forth with the naming too. I created the MMS 2012 policy to runbook migration. I have the originals, which need to be fixed, and the fixed and updated versions that, well, those are for my examples, sort of like a cooking show. So what I've done is I've already exported this, but I can do it again. Remember, step 1 was install Orchestrator. You saw it was up, so I didn't have to really worry about that. Actually, I think I had this. Yes, here they are. You see, I have the example for vSphere I'll get to later, but this is the example. I'm not going to, oh, no, you want to see it. I'm going to do it. So this export screen doesn't have password protection or anything because it's Opalis. So I'm going to click Finish on here. It is now exporting this folder and all the goodies inside it. This is that step 2, export your policies. This is a good point to bring up. If you have massive amounts of policies, I mean truly lots and lots, you may get an error saying a red X and then an error message, and it's not a fun experience. Basically, the database has trouble exporting all that information into an OS export file, which is essentially XML. You may have to break up your folders into various exports to get them across. That's just a forewarning there. Not going to happen every time, and you don't know it's going to happen until it happens. So if that happens, don't freak out. Well, you can if you want, but don't freak out and take a smaller chunk, essentially. As long as you get everything you need over. And it's side by side, so you're not deleting anything until you're absolutely ready for it. So I've exported that. Let's hop over to the RTM machine, and we're going to import. This import screen looks a little different. It has a password. Obviously, what we sent there to this machine as an export doesn't have any password, so we don't have to worry about that, but we want to go pick that up. Those are the solution examples I put up on CodePlex. And I'm just going to navigate to C Demo 2 and the one I just created. And I'm just going to hit Finish. So this is going to import everything. You're going to see a lot of things fly by in the bottom there, a lot of things that don't relate to anything. When you export, especially folders, you get everything as far as global settings is concerned. Everything. So if you have 100,000 variables and counters and stuff like that, whether they're related to your policies or not, they will come across. So you could deal with it on the Orchestrator side or the Opalis side. And if you do deal with it on the Orchestrator side, it might be a little easier, except you're going to have deleted items in the database. If you bring it over as a clean import, you won't have those deleted items. So it's completely up to you. I recommend cleaning them up ahead of time. The reason I brought all that stuff in is to show you this folder contains the information that I need for these policies that I brought over. All this other stuff has nothing to do with those, but they're brought over. So now the step would be, if you decided to do it this way, is basically delete everything that's not relevant. If you want to, you'd have to set up a second Opalis database on the Opalis side. And I have a video on this, on how to clean up your exports. I recommend doing that method, following that video. Clean it up in that second Opalis database, then export it, and then import it into here. That's what I recommend, so you don't have all this garbage in here. Unless it's all relevant, in which case, don't worry about it. So for us, though, I wanted to put this in here specifically to show you that everything comes over regardless. And that's because global settings are global, and they can be used by anything. My separation into folders is purely logical and purely organizational. So that's sort of the story there. Let's take a look at what we got here. So I'm going to expand all my folders. So in the original, I'm going to be toggling back and forth, so it might get kind of confusing. But on the original, I have some legacy foundation objects. This is the managed text file object that's chosen to be leveraged as a read text. So if I go to General, you can see read line. And you have the other options. This is an old activity or object. In the new one, let's see what it comes over as. Our happy friend, the question mark. And you go, well, I'll just configure that. I'm sure I could change that. Oh, you can't. So if you don't fix it on the Opalis side, then you have this, and you have to do back and forth comparisons, which is fine. I mean, if you have a system set up like this, you could copy and paste. It wouldn't be that difficult. Let's look at what it looks like fixed on this side, and that's down here in the fixed and legacy foundation objects. There we go. So I had changed these on the Opalis side, as you can see over here. So I did the work ahead of time and imported them on into Orchestrator. You don't have to do that, because I could have as easily, oops, sorry, I got a little wild there. I could have as easily created a new one here, but I wanted to show you both options. Now let's open this guy up. The other thing that's very important, you're going to be making changes to your policies to Runbooks. So why not make them better? improve your process. That's one of the most important things. If we check the Opalis version, we were leveraging a variable, which is good. But let's say that was C:\demo\file name. I might not have that exact path in my new server. So if I had leveraged that path hard-coded 100 times, I'd have to change that 100 times. So you want to leverage variables, which are more statics, that you change the value once, but it's referenced 100 times. There's always improvements, because I could build runbooks 5 years ago, and I'd go back and, I should have done this, this, and this. So likely you've built some policies that you're going to bring over that were built a while ago. So use the new best practices that you've learned since then to make them better once you bring them over. Like here, line numbers, that may not change that often, but if it does at all, to avoid updating or needing to update the runbook itself, you could variabilize that and then change it in the variable. That's just something like that. Now, we have the append line, obviously, is fully dynamic. The blue text means that it's dynamic, as I said before, or I've said in the past. And then I've changed from a send pop-up to send platform, as send pop-up is not available anymore, and send platform is just as good. If you want to, you can install the Twitter IP and tweet your results. From unknown object to objects that you can manipulate and change and make better. That's the most important part. Let's take a look at just non-legacy foundation objects, which means they are objects that exist in Opalis, and they're objects that exist in Orchestrator. So query database, this one will come over, you won't have to worry about it. But I bet there are a couple objects or activities in your environment that are configured. Yeah, you have a query, that's fine. But I bet some of you have hard-coded servers and initial catalogs in here, which means if you're changing servers or referencing different databases, that when I go to run this, like if I run this in this environment right now, localhost will probably be fine. But what happens in SQL, since I've renamed with my install to Orchestrator, that Opalis table or database doesn't exist anymore, so it's going to fail. And if you're going to change it, why come in here and type Orchestrator in here? Because more than likely you have more than one of these activities, right? So create and I'm going to actually modify this, create a variable, reference that, and then you can copy and paste this activity over and over again, and then you don't have to worry. You could change it once and not 100 different times. As we see in my databases, I do not have an Opalis database. So obviously, if we ran this, it would fail. And because it's on the second tab down, you may not realize it right away, and it might be frustrating. So you're going to change these activities. You might as well make them better. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to check it out. The caps table still exists in the Orchestrator database, so that's fine. But localhost, I want new variable. Type the name of the variable, SQL Server. And the SQL Server's name is cjdemo-sco beta. That's because I've used the same machine for all the different versions. And I'm going to create a new variable again, and it'll be SQL database. And this is Orchestrator RTM. There we go. We have two new variables. Very easy to do. Worth the effort. Connection, set a local host. We'll reference the variable. Server. And database. Variable. So in a couple seconds, I have made this runbook way more dynamic, which means that if I have to export it or copy and paste this guy again and again, this information will stay, and I don't have to modify it over and over again. Good news was I had the foresight when I was creating my alert, or the notification portion of this, that I use dynamic data with the field function. So I'll be able to just run this right now, check it in, run it. It was successful, 3 SEM platform events, because I have 3, I selected the top 3 items from the CAPS table, which is the integration packs table. And if we go over here, we can see that that information was pulled. It didn't fail because I made modifications, and now I know that this is better. The best part is I can copy this activity into a new runbook, and let's say instead of top 3, I wanted all of them. This is going to work out of the box. If I use the runbook tester, for example, and hit run, we're going to get all of the integration pack data back at once, as you see here. And I didn't make any modifications. It's still hitting the same database. It got more data this time because I changed the query, but that's all I changed. So it's just concepts like that. I know that this part's not very exciting, but all right. So we went from foundation. We did the foundation object stuff, changes. Obviously, with my best practices, I really should copy this tab down into the fix, but I think you get the point there. So let's move on to legacy mode. There are a couple things wrong with this picture. First and foremost, you probably recognize that there is a unknown object or question mark. That's write computer. That's the managed text file activity or object that didn't translate over. The next thing you might see is there is a loop within the policy or runbook, and that, while it works, if we go to the Opalis system, see how there's no, this works and is fine because it's an Opalis, and this guy is in legacy mode. So if we go to properties, run behavior, that's not checked. That's how you know whether you're in runbook mode or pipeline mode or not. So if I run this, and I have run it in the past, you can see, as long as my action server is up on this side, we should be okay. It is. So what it's doing is getting a computer name out of the database, writing that name to a file, updating that table that I've written this to a file, getting the next one moving along. I mean, it's a silly example, but you may have something that's similar to that does that. This works in how many seconds? 9:03:10 to 9:03:18, so 8 seconds. On the orchestrator side, well, it's not going to work at all. In fact, it's been brought over. You see the tab up here is checked out. Tab out here is checked out. Any legacy mode policy that you have will be imported as checked out because there's no hope for it working ever. In fact, if I check it in, it yells at me saying that the runbook contains a cycle. Cycle is circular graph, in policy loop, whatever you want to call it. You could hit OK on this, and it gets saved to the database, but it gets saved with this bad object, and it's not going to work. It'll just fail. So what's the remedy for that? You move your legacy mode stuff to pipeline mode, and I have done that. For legacy mode, I could get away with loops in policy. Leveraging pipeline mode, though, and the activities therein, we can use object level, activity level looping, and that can be on a invoke runbook activity, which means everything that's in this runbook can be executed any number of times while looping through it. And that's exactly what this does. So this invoke runbook activity calls the second one, and it will loop every 5 seconds, and it'll only exit that loop once it reads a complete equals true that's generated on this side, which we know complete equals true based on there are no more records to update. So this replaces the functionality that you've seen previously, but I've run this in the past, and to save time, I won't run it now. Oh, no. Well, you wouldn't see that. I ran this a while back. So I'll run it now. It's no big deal. Rest assured, this takes more than 9 seconds to execute because even triggering a runbook sometimes, takes more than 9 seconds. So the point of this is just because you change your runbooks to meet the Orchestrator compliance and follow best practices, sometimes they're not as efficient as they should be. In fact, this will sit here and hopefully turn. Oh, it's failing. Oh, you know why? Because I did, whether you think so or not, I did that on purpose. Incident access doesn't exist. This is one of the things. You're going to start testing, but like, oh, what did I do? So obviously, it's going to fail. And my looping construct here, if I've built it correctly, well, I haven't. That's another good point. It will loop forever because it doesn't have the information to stop looping. So these are things that you're going to want to improve the process on. So I'll hit stop there. Open up, get computer name, connection. Period works just fine. I always recommend using variable since we created one. Let's see, we're in pipeline mode. There's the SQL Server database, or SQL Server, which happens to be, it's Opalis 6.3. I'm just not going to have to go actually change that variable. Initial catalog, instead of hard coding that, I'll go grab it from here. And then that should be fine. See, if I had done that earlier, I wouldn't have to do this over and over and over again. So I'm doing this to be painful for me and apparently painful for you. But if you don't, this is exactly what would happen and what you'd have to do. So it's very true to life. All right, so I have finished there. But as we noticed previously, it didn't have the right data in it. Just because it's a policy doesn't mean, or it's a variable doesn't mean it doesn't need to be changed. So Opalis 6.3 doesn't exist anymore, but CJ demo-sco beta does, and incident access doesn't exist anymore. But in ours, we have demo, which has that computers table that we're looking for. So I'm just demo, finish, and then. We haven't really looked at this yet, but cdemo, you guys are clever enough to know that I probably don't have a cdemo. Oh, there's demo 2. So these I put in here as trip-ups, whether I forgot them or not. So I would show you that it's 2 different servers. Remember that, and you're going to have to make modifications likely when you change from one to the next. If you don't, that's great, but just consider that you might. So if we go back to pipeline mode here, folder. This guy's good now. That guy should be good. Right computer. The hard-coded. We don't want that, and we know we have a variable for that. And everything else should be good, so I'm going to check this in. Now back to my point. Now this is all good. Oh, let's check this guy out. I'll change that looping to say the number of attempts should never be greater than, whatever, 100. At least you know it'll end at that point. You could obviously change that number. So now if I start this up, all right. Oh, because they're all switched on to be complete. Do select. So this is the table it was reading from, and it's only reading, and it actually worked as it expected because processed was checked 1 for all of them. So obviously to do the demo properly, I would uncheck all of those. But the point is, that's a good point too. This is a reference table that your policies or runbook is using, and if it's in a state where when your testing is not ready, you're going to have to make modifications that have a policy or runbook to refresh that or whatever. Obviously, it would be this. I'll execute that. Now, if we do this, all processes have been changed to 0. Now, if I run this, now it's going to go through and iteratively do that. So these are all things that you may or may not run into, just as examples in your testing process. And this is all part of the growing pains, I guess, from migrating. And what I'm trying to illustrate here is that it's not as easy as exporting, importing, and then magically everything works, because the environments are different, scenarios might be different. There are major process improvements that you could perform. But now this is going to run through over and over again until it goes through all 27 line items. The reason they were all switched to processed is because a previous demo, obviously, but well, that's the answer to that. But this is going to take 5 minutes to complete, and that's not great. So how can that be improved? Well, if we think about what we're doing, we're reading, and then we're writing. I mean, that's pretty simplistic. So I've improved this even more down in the fixed and updated in a Runbook called 4.3 improvement for 4.1. And who knows, maybe you've inherited your Opalis system, and that person thought cycling through that would be better because they didn't know how published data worked. Well, this 4-activity Runbook does the same exact thing that the other one did, except it will execute in mere seconds as well. So this one's just getting where process equals 0. So obviously if we run this, let's see how many are. It's processed only 6 of them, or 5 of them so far. So that's a lot longer than 9 seconds. So I could actually run this guy, which I believe I've leveraged the variables already. All right. So let's create another, because I'm going to have these run at the same time. I'm going to create another variable for text file path write demo2, and I want to be c:/demo2/computers4.txt. So I'm going to write them to a different file so they don't step on each other. And I go back to here, modify the usage of that variable, finish, check it in. We'll run this. A lot of questions we get, forums and on the DLs internally, is how do I get my database object to loop or something, like I want it to do multiple things afterwards. That's inherently baked in to these activities. If they generate multiple lines of data, the next activity will execute that number of times. So it's like looping, but it's just being pushed all at once. So we can see here that write computer happened a whole bunch of times and update record. Now the other one will actually finish because I've updated that process thing. So if we go over here, I've trumped the other running thing. Now that's done. But if we go and check the here's computers 4, it wrote all that stuff. And then computers 3 will be, well, I've been using this for demos over and over again, but you can see where it restarted right about here. It didn't make it all the way through, but if we go back to it, it's finished because it has no more things to read. So both are valid as far as getting the job done, but obviously the process improvement from that one took how many minutes just to do 5 to this one taking literally 13, 39 to 48, 9 seconds again. Or, so this is the obviously best improvement for something that was like this. Just look for those things and be aware of those things. All right. So now we're on to OIS IPs. So we see this is the orchestrator. This is what I brought in. If I go to Opalis and click on that same folder, these are vSphere activities, or objects. I don't have a vSphere environment, but you can still see I can open it and it's usable if I wanted to. Like I said, I have nothing to choose from, but I can interact with the controls. Obviously, if I go back to Orchestrator, we get our unusable thing. So I told you in the very beginning that the reason for this is that it's not installed on this side. That's a simple fix. If it happened to be that you have a version installed, but it's not the version it came from, all the object references are different in the database, then that's a whole other issue, and hopefully you don't run up against that at all. But the remedy for this is very simple. Close the Runbook Designer, open up the Deployment Manager for Orchestrator, see that you have everything you have installed, but oh, I forgot to register and deploy the vSphere one. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. It's a two-step process, registering and deploying. Now I've got to find it in this list. There it is. My goodness. Next, what computer do we want to put it on? Oh, well, I didn't realize that it would not translate. Localhost is easier to type than that. Next, next, finish. Now it's going to deploy that software. You're going to have to re-import those policies to associate, because once it's imported, it has a reference in the database that's unknown object. That's just written, and that's what it is. Unsupportedly, you could go and refresh all those references to this new thing, but it's easier and supported to re-import the policy. So we see that it is installed somewhere. There it is. So we're good to go. So one of the lessons learned here is that make sure your environment that you're moving to has all the software that you need that came from the other one. So I have in this folder, to prove my point, those are still bad because they're referencing unknown object. There's nothing you could do about that in a supported way. Down here, that tab does not exist yet. I happen to have the vSphere export portion, just that portion. Hit finish. Okay, I did this on purpose. That vSphere export had all of the variables, all of the global settings, everything in it. That's why it's best to make sure things are cleaned up. If I hit yes to all here, it's fine. It'll go through and just replace everything that's there. Maybe that's not what you want to do. Especially, that's not what I want to do. I just made a bunch of changes, right? So the problem I have here, and I'll do this for the demonstration, if I hit no to all for all of the prompts for various things, it gets even messier in the variables, and I'll show you that. The good news is our VMware vSphere activities are active, and we can play around with them. Obviously, there's nothing connected over here, but you can see I have access to the controls. The bad news is everywhere it didn't replace, it added a paren1 for all those things. So that makes it can't replace it, so it created a new one. Let's say I did this, imported it again. It would be paren2. Imported again, paren3. This is important. If you have multiple people using the same environment and they don't know what to do and they hit no to all because they're worried about it, this can be a mess in very quick time. So when you're migrating, clean up your runbooks from all that stuff, or don't export it if you don't need it, sort of thing, because those are options in the export and they're options in the import. But I did this so you can see that if you leave everything default and you hit no to all, you're going to make a bigger mess than you probably want to clean up. And if you're wondering what's the fastest way to delete all this stuff, it's certainly not clicking on one of them and hitting delete, clicking on one. Here's a tip for you. Create a new folder and drag this stuff in there, hit refresh, hit delete, or right-click delete. So that's somewhat helpful, but you could still sometimes hit refresh, things go back to where they were. It's a database write thing. So basically it's going to change the parent ID to that new folder. I mean, this is regardless of where you are in the UI. Anything you create on the right-hand side or left-hand side is essentially a record in a database that associates itself with some other record in the database by parent-child relationship. So that's why I always like to hit refresh and make sure that it's doing what I think it's doing, because sometimes there's a lag between the UI and the database, and it's just better safe than sorry. That was an easy fix. vSphere integration pack's installed, so these guys light up. They will not go back and change the existing ones, but that's not a big deal because you could re-import. As far as another example, we have the execute PS script, this IP that's on Codeplex. This one, if we go to Opalis, this one exists. It's fine. You could open it, move it around. See, I have a password in here. It's one of the main reasons I and other people use this integration pack is so you could obscure that password. So let's take a look at what it looks like when it came over on the Orchestrator side. there's no password. So when you import during this migration process from Opalis to Orchestrator, passwords aren't stored in the export, so they're not entered into here, which means you have a couple options. One is you can type it in again, or you can reference a variable. Oh, now you see my password. There's new functionality in Orchestrator that lets you hash that password, and I'll get to that in a couple of minutes. So I have a freshly saved one over here, which is leveraging all those variables that I had created. This is the improved process using variables. And if we click in here, you'll see that it's referenced as a password, but it is hashing it. Now all we need to do is go back to where that password is, and instead of saying, hey, that's my password, I could do encrypted variable, and now it is encrypted. So if I reference it, it looks something like that, or it looks like the GUID reference. So, and if you think you got sneaky guys in your department, they're going, I'm going to go discover what that is, I'm going to have the password for everything, then they will be sad, because it blanks it out. I wonder if I hit cancel. That's good. I don't have to type it in again. So there may be this runbook has one activity, so it's not that critical. I mean, it does a git process for PowerShell using these credentials. There's not much more I can do to this to make it more dynamic or anything. So that's it on the IPs. So you got really two places you could fall down here. One is the IP's not installed, or the other is the IP version that the runbooks are expecting are not installed. And both ways, the result will look something like this. The first way, obviously, is very easy to resolve with installing the software and then re-importing. The second one is a bit more difficult, and I hope that you do not run up against it. All right, so I'm going to move away from the migration tips. And now I want to show you a couple of things as far as new functionality. We saw that password stuff, so let's revisit that. I'm just going to create a new runbook at the top here, and I'm going to show you what it looks like, if you're wondering, if I reference that password here. And if we look over on the right-hand side, that's the password, but it's kind of encrypted with, funky stuff. We put it in there, hit finish, check it in, run this. It's going to create a send platform event outputting the password, or is it? Well, it did, and if you could read that, that's not my password. You saw my password, so that's not it. All right. So the password functionality is very basic and very easy to use. It was a nice add-in at the end because we've been asking for this for a long time. If you create a .NET script and you had to put clear text passwords in here, this is a good alternative. In the run.NET script activity, the script body is no longer output because there's potential for passwords in there, and we didn't want that, so that's one change there. Next change that I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to quickly get rid of this. I'm going to create two runbooks. I'm going to rename this one to parent and this one to child. And in this one, I am going to put a initialize data and a send platform. What I'm going to show here is that in the testing console, you can use the invoke runbook activity. So I'm just going to put a parameter in here. It's called parameter 1. And I'm going to reference that parameter in here. There's nothing, not very complex process here. But in the parent, I'm going to put in initialize data so I can start the whole thing off and invoke runbook. Connect these up. Connect these up. Add another parameter in here. I'll just do this parameter from master or from parent, just so I know the difference. In invoke runbook, I'm going to select my child. I'm going to pass in the data, just so you see that's what it does. It doesn't matter. I'm not waiting for it to complete. But instead of checking it, well, I'll check it in to save it. I'll check it back out. Do the runbook tester. If you've done this in the past, runbook tester has failed because it can't interact with something that's not in this little session that it creates. Now this is not going to interact like you expect it to. What people expect and what I expected is this will kick off and then it'll open up a runbook tester and do the next one. If you do not have this guy checked in, I'll do it, it fails because, and you would think, oh wait, but that's how the runbook tester works, right? Things are checked out. This is not operating like you think, so let's check that in. I'll run it. We did it, and we see that, you probably can't read that, but it says queued, which means it's just given to the database as something that's going to be next. If we check on the log history, there it is. The point here is it's going to invoke the runbook, but it has to, well, it doesn't have to be, I guess, unless you don't want an error. It is going to invoke the runbook, but it has to be running on the action server, or the runbook server. The conundrum there is you're running your runbook tester as you logged in. The action server runs as the runbook service. So you may be testing and mismatching credentials and stuff like that. The other thing is the whole point of testing is to slow it down and next. And there's no option for that. So you're going to still, if you wanted to slow this testing down of the child, you're going to have to open the runbook tester, test that, and then go back, open the parent, and test that, and then don't have it continue for here, like disable that activity or something. So that's that new functionality. I don't know if you'll use it. I know I probably won't use it for how it was intended like that. It's just, it works, but I'm not sure that that's the implementation that people accepted or expected. So next bit of new feature is we'll open up Invoke Runbook, and now we have a security tab. If we go to Opalis, there is no security details tab. You may be wondering, what does that mean? Well, that means I can trigger the child runbook or the target runbook with different security credentials than what are being used in the action server service. That means if I specify a different account, username and account here, it will execute this whole runbook under that context as opposed to what's in the service account, which is nice because that means if you had 10 objects in here, you wouldn't have to go into security credentials for each of those activities. It'll just run them under that. So that is a nice feature. It's a blanket impersonation essentially for that runbook during runtime, and it is configured in the runbook activity for security. And you will be happy to see that if I have the username, I could type the password in there, it's hashed, or what I recommend is using the variable. That way you don't have to copy, passwords change, right? And the easiest way to update those is in a variable, and that way you don't have to worry about it, going into where did I use that password sort of thing. It doesn't matter, because if you needed to change the password, it's as simple as my new password, encrypt it, finish. So, and then it has been changed. Last bit of functionality I'll go over is password-protected exports. So we've created something that uses a password down here, obviously. And we saw that no password actually came through when we exported it from Opalis to Orchestrator. So I'm just going to export this folder. And I'm going to password protect this export. So test. Remember your passwords, because you will be sad. I'm not going to export the counters. I'll just do the variables. But we know what's going to happen there. It's going to export everything, and we'll have to deal with that. But we're exporting from somewhere where we made the changes last, so it's less painful. And we don't have any global configurations, so it's not a big deal. So I'm going to do password. Oh, it looks like I've done this before. I'll overwrite that. Yes, finish. It's exporting these two runbooks. One of them has a password in it. I'll open up that file so you can see a bit of the difference between the password protected. Is it done? Yeah. The password protected runbook. I'm going to open it in Notepad. It's hard to see, but at the top we have something called encryption salt, and then the salt here. So that's different than if we opened up the export that's coming from Orchestrator or Opalis. So if we open up that one, where was it? Here. There is no encryption salt at the top, or pepper for that matter. So that's new, obviously. Now, the password is going to be encrypted in that file, just like the whole thing is password protected, so you can't even glean the password out of that file. So that file is safe. But let's import it up here, and your expectation would be that the password is still in there, so you don't have to go and modify that. If you don't type the password in there, it assumes blank password, which is still a value, but it's different than test, so it won't match up. I'm going to just hit finish. Hear that questions over and over again. I don't want to hit no to all because I don't want another set. So I'm going to hit yes, and then this next pop-up is, you've said you want to overwrite the variable, but do you want to overwrite the data that's in there? Because that's, you might not want to do that. I don't care, so I'm choosing yes. So in a couple seconds, we're going to see, here we are, go over to kick, and the password's still there. It's not blank, so you could save some time. And it is still referencing the variable. So a little bit of convenient stuff there. Do have a couple minutes left, so I'll just open up the Orchestrator console and show you that, since that is new functionality. Whether you use it or not, I don't know if people find it useful or not. It really depends on how you're implementing and using Orchestrator. I use the old operator console when I was using Opalis a lot, because I don't have to log into the server and go into the client. I could just access from the web. Same thing here. This can be published out, so you can get to it anywhere. It is Silverlight, so there's a requirement on that. It's Silverlight 5. So if you have 4, you will have to update. It is currently looking through all the runbooks, and hopefully this will finish. So here it is. So you could expand on the left-hand side, and if we wanted to kick this one off, in beta it was much more difficult to navigate and start and stuff. So here I could click Start Runbook, and then pass in any variables or parameters, hit Start, and it will start up. If I wanted to see what it looked like, I could click on View Definition, and the diagram's down here. Nothing special there. That executed likely, and well, it failed because I probably didn't. I don't have WinRM enabled on this, so those are other things. You're moving to a new server, so you're going to run into quirks like that, configuration quirks. So, but that's essentially how you use the Orchestrator console. Online resources is a part of this. There's my blog, there's my YouTube channel, there's the Codeplex site that I post to quite regularly, System Center information. There is a migration TechNet article, or set of articles, that was created by the PG for the community. I leveraged some of that information in the session today. Related content, there is a System Center Opalis Integration Server 6.3 book. I happen to be one of the authors, Mark's the other author, and there's a number of MVPs listed on there as well. Like I said, everything that you did in Opalis is mostly relevant for Orchestrator, so it's not a bad thing. I also have a lot of Opalis information on my blog, and my videos. So whatever you choose, if you like a hard copy, it is available. So I think that's it, and thank you very much.
We certainly appreciate you watching. Thank you.